Hello and good evening. My name is Sandra Blythe, and thank you for taking this journey with me this evening to talk about emotional assassination by mischaracterization. As I continue to present these premiere videos, we're going to be working under the theme of a place of healing. So a lot of these subtitles will involve emotional wounds. How do we heal from them? What are the causes of them? It will have everything to do with injuries, emotional injuries, and everything to do with how we can heal. This is really about taking care of yourself, having an awareness of what you can do to avoid some of the pitfalls that position us to be emotionally wounded. So tonight we're going to talk again about emotional assassination by mischaracterization. So the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit with you about mischaracterization. What are we talking about? Emotional assassination by mischaracterization. What are we talking about? Missing the true character of the person. Missing the true character of the person. I don't want you to confuse this with judging people. We're not talking about judging. We're talking about assessing, evaluating, and being able to see people for who they are. So when we talk about mischaracterization, we talk about missing the true character of the person, missing the true character of the individual. I didn't get it right. Now, this is going to be really interesting when we talk about this mischaracterization, because we tend to be more visual than vigilant. What did I just say? We tend to assess people based on what we see, as opposed to paying close attention to who they really are. So we're not having the conversations, we're not doing due diligence to really begin to peel back layers to understand, see, or obtain accurate information that would actually tell you who that person is. And subsequently, we end up having people in our space, in our personal space, in our inner circle. We end up having people in those arenas based on mischaracterization, based on what we think we see, which in essence tells us who that person is. Now, we might as well go ahead and own it, because all of us at some point in time are guilty of being visual and not vigilant. We're guilty of not doing our due diligence to really be able to ascertain, who is this person that I'm considering letting in my personal space? Who is this person that I have let in my personal space? So when we talk about being vigilant and not visual, what's that visual thing? How do we slip up when it comes down to visual? I'm glad you asked that question. When we're visual, it's almost that concept, and I know we've heard the old adage, everything that glitters isn't gold. We've heard that one. If we haven't heard that one, put it in your pocket. Now you've got it. So what tends to happen when we're dealing with people, we start to look at what they wear. We start to look at where they work. We start to look at the people they associate with. We start to look at what they drive. We start to look at where they live. We start to look at the perception of their financial status quo. We start to look at a lot of things that are very superficial. They have no real substance. We start looking at stuff and things. We start looking at, is it a mover and a shaker? Are they associating with the movers and the shakers? We start looking at things that at the end of the day, when we consider those things, really are not true to how well we will engage with that person. It really doesn't stand the test of Is this person healthy for me? Will they be toxic? How will they treat me? What kind of conversations will we have? Do they have my best interest at heart? A lot of things will get left out of the equation when we are visual and we have the mischaracterization. We begin to see this at a completely different level that leaves us handicapped. So there's this process that we really have to embrace as we begin to determine the people who connect with us, or determine the people who will be healthy in our space. So let's think about that. Visual versus vigilance. And we end up in a situation where we can be emotionally assassinated. So what are we talking about? That word assassination seems to keep coming back, and it just sounds so deep that it might even feel exaggerated. But when we think about emotional assassination, I want you to think about sudden, secret, or unexpected. Sudden, secret, or unexpected. Therefore, if I'm not vigilant in really trying to get to know who this person is before I have this comfort level, before I have this space of healthiness that says, this is a good person to be in my space, there's some things that I really have to ascertain. So what we have on the screen now, emotional assassination takes place in friendships, takes place in relationships, romantic relationships. It can take place in business partnerships. It can take place in work environments. So I wanted you to really understand, we're not focusing on one thing versus another. We have several dimensions that we're looking at, that when we don't do vigilance, when we don't keep close watch, when we're not paying attention, when we don't have the awareness, when we're not really doing what we need to do to understand how and if these type of situations can be healthy, it's very dangerous to open yourself up to everybody and anybody. Say what you will, it is it's a statement of fact. It's very dangerous to open yourself up to anybody and everybody. Because when we do not step back and assess the people that we're interfacing with, then we do run the risk of emotional assassination. We do run the risk of that sudden, secret, unexpected emotional injury, which equals the emotional assassination. And it's unexpected because we go back to the visual. It's sudden because we go back to the visual. We go back to, well, when I met her, I saw. When I met him, I saw. When I met them, I saw. And based on what I thought I saw, I determined based on what I saw, he would be a good friend. I determined based on what I saw, that would be a good relationship for me. I concluded based on what I saw, this would be a great person to go into business with. I concluded on what I thought I saw, this would be a great work environment. Everything visual and nothing left to vigilance. Keeping a close watch, paying attention, having an awareness, doing an assessment to really understand, am I safe in this space emotionally and mentally? For that reason, I go back to saying we cannot open ourselves up to everybody, because everybody in your personal space, everybody in your inner circle is not going to work. Everybody does not have your well-being at heart. Everybody is not looking at the betterment of who you are and where you'll go. Everybody is not supporting you. And when we talk about this emotional assassination, when we talk about emotional injuries, I truly will say and understand it's not about people always coming for you on a malicious level, that is intentional, that they strike some chords that create emotional wounds. We understand some things are unintentional. You can have a healthy relationship and still be emotionally wounded, but the premises of that emotional wound is going to look very different than it does with an emotional wound or the emotional assassination that you encounter by someone who is toxic, by someone who does not have your best interests at heart. The basis of those two scenarios are going to be extremely different. But if we're not careful and if we're not paying attention, what will happen? We will be more susceptible to emotional assassinations when we do not utilize our awareness, having self-awareness, understanding that everything we see isn't everything we see. We can take certain information and process it into a space that says, because I see A, B, and C, that means this is a good person to have in my space, only to find out that having that person in your space creates emotional wounds, creates emotional injuries. And you find yourself drowning in a situation that through what you saw, you had expected it to be something extremely different than what it turned out to be. How often, or can you recall a situation where you allowed someone into your space as a friend and you based it on some very surface things that you saw about that person? You thought, oh gosh, this is going to be a great friend. This is going to be a great friendship. This is going to be great. And before too long, you started to discover or you started to experience the emotional assassination, the unexpected, the emotional injuries, the hurtful words, the hurtful behavior, the lack of support. And you said, well, I thought because I saw A, B, and C, that equated to this being someone who would be a good friend. Because I saw X, Y, and Z surface, I thought this would be a great guy to be in a relationship with, only to discover the emotional wounds, the emotional injuries. Emotional assassination by mischaracterization. And we see it starts at the beginning. It starts with our assessment or lack of assessment about what we think somebody is, who we think somebody is, based on what we see. So how do we avoid that kind of situation? How do we make sure that we have a level of self-awareness? What do we do to change the narrative? I want to give you an example, and then we're going to walk through this. When you go to an event or when you have an appointment, typically there's a waiting room, a lobby. There's something that comes prior to being admitted into the event. There's something that comes prior to being admitted into the room for service. There's something that's required prior to, and prior to that coming to fruition, you're in a waiting room. Now, if you're in a waiting room, you've paid no admission fee. If you're in a waiting room, you haven't done what's required of you to get into the door in some instances. Whether it's you didn't fill out the paperwork, you need to present a certain type of ID, you need to present a certain type of card, or if it's you have to pay a certain amount of money in order to get in, there has to be something that allows you to have the admission into the event. So if we think of the admission into the event as the admission into my personal space, the admission into my inner circle. If we think of the waiting room as a period of time that we have to have this dialogue, that we have to have this encounter, this interaction before we can allow someone to enter in, then I think it becomes a little bit more clear. So if we think of this waiting room, as we're talking about avoiding this emotional assassination by mischaracterization, if we think about the waiting room from this sense, engaging, allowing people into my space, allowing people into the inner circle, allowing people, you know what, I have to have a waiting room. Think about that for a minute. What if you had a waiting room before you would allow people into your personal space, before you would allow people into your inner circle? And the purpose of that waiting room is to ensure that they have what they need, or that they have what you need for admission. Whoa, some lights should have came on that one. If you had a waiting room, and the purpose for the waiting room is to make sure that these people have what you need in order for them to have admission into your personal space, into your inner circle. There are going to be some people in the waiting room who are going to get turned away because they don't have what you need to enter into your space. There are going to be some people in the waiting room who may have to come back at a later time because they don't have what you need to enter into your personal space. And then there are going to be some people who will be able to be admitted into your space because they have what you need. Is it coming together for you? Some lights should be coming on now. Some neon lights should be flashing like, oh my gosh, didn't think of that. Because as I said, sometimes we rush and we move in haste because we're moving based on what we see. So if I see that you seem to be an accomplished person, if I see that you seem to have, if I see that you seem to know the movers and shakers, if I see that you have status quo, if I see, get where I'm going? If I see, then I'm comfortable excusing you from the process of the waiting room, which should never happen. Because the waiting room is that place where I can discover more than what I see. Come on, do your happy dance, because I just told you something. The waiting room is a place where I discover more than what I see. The waiting room allows me to slow down this process, make sure that I am not putting someone into my personal space who is going to be emotionally unhealthy for me, someone who is going to inflict emotional injuries on me, and someone who is not going to be good for me, someone who's going to be toxic, someone who does not have my best interest at heart. So that waiting room, that period, that mediator or that mediation room, it's a mediation room. Well, how are we mediating? So this is the point where I take what I know and I put it up against what I find out. And then I make this determination and say, is this going to work for me? And the mediation is taking the criterias. The mediation is taking the qualifications. What is the criteria? What are the standards? And I'm not trying to complicate having friends. I'm not trying to complicate having business partners. I'm not trying to complicate any of the engagements or interactions that we have. But I do think it is very necessary for us to look at things more than surface level. So it's okay that it takes a minute. And I don't mean a literal minute, but it's okay that it takes time for us to have this waiting room so that we can peel back some layers, so that we can make a determination as to, is this something that will be healthy? Is this something that is going to work? And again, I want you to be very, very clear. This has nothing to do with judging people. This has nothing to do with discounting people. But reality is this: everybody cannot be in your space. Some people are not good to you, good for you. Some people will not be healthy for you. Some people will be very toxic. And if we allow our vision or our visualization to be the determination of who has our personal space, who has our inner circle, we're going to open ourselves up to a whole lot of emotional assassination because we're looking at the wrong things. See, that waiting room allows me to move the external out of the way. So it's not about what I see. See, the waiting room allows me to begin to peel back layers of the inner person. Who are you for real, for real? Because you can show me a lot of stuff and I might even get excited. I might even become a little impressed. But at the end of the day, if we move away the externals and we have a conversation and we have another conversation and we have another conversation and I keep pulling back some layers and I'm being exposed to that internal person, it gives me an opportunity to make this assessment of what I see and now what I know, what I see and what I'm hearing. And at the end of that, it may come out and be okay. Or at the end of it, I may be surprised and say, wow, this is not that. This is not that at all. This is not what I thought I saw. It's not. He's not. She's not. They're not. That's not what I thought I saw. And I'm surely glad we stayed in the waiting room so that I could check some credentials. Oh, yeah, I said credentials. It gave me an opportunity to go deeper. It gave me an opportunity to see past what I thought I saw. So that's the purpose of that waiting room. That's the purpose of taking your time when you talk about a business partner, taking your time when you talk about a friend, taking your time when you talk about a work environment, taking your time when you talk about a romantic relationship, taking your time and making sure that you incorporate the waiting room. Because everything that glitters is not gold. Just think of how different our life will look if we take this opportunity to understand that emotional assassination is real. It happens. We said sudden, we said secret, and we said unexpected. It can be sudden, it can be secret, it can be unexpected. I didn't see that coming. I didn't think he was that kind of person. I didn't think she was that kind of person. And the reason why we didn't think that he or she was that kind of person is because we didn't spend any time with them in the waiting room. We saw what we wanted to see, and we took that information, however superficial it may have been, and we opened up our arms and we said, come into my personal space. Be a part of my inner circle, because from everything I've seen, you're going to be good to me, good for me. A mistake that we can make when we have no vigilance, when we have no self-awareness, when we don't take our time. But I want you, if you don't remember anything else that I talked about this evening, I want you to remember this waiting room, because I think it is so important for us to be able to make proper assessments about people that we engage with. And I don't want you to get thrown off by the word emotional. So when I say business partner, you say, well, what does emotional have to do with that? And I say emotional, and you say, well, what does that have to do with a work environment? Our emotions are a part of everything that we do. Everything that we do. So even in a business partnership, we can be partnering up with someone who is very unhealthy for us emotionally. The way that they talk to us, the way that they treat us, the way that they dismiss us. Oh yeah, that's real. And that can definitely transpire in a business partnership, because we didn't go through the waiting room. We just saw what we thought would be beneficial to us, what we thought would be beneficial for us. And, oh, he knows a lot of people. She knows a lot of people. I think she's really smart in business. I think he's really smart. And yeah, we're just going to partner up, and it's going to be a great partnership because of what I see. Only to find out this person is toxic and unhealthy for your space, no matter how good they may be on the business realm or in the business realm. They are toxic and detrimental to you emotionally. Same thing for a work environment. It may glitter. We may think that's going to be gold. Oh, I think these people are going to be really great. I've talked to them. I've been around them, blah, 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 blah. Only to get there and be emotionally wounded and emotionally assassinated because we didn't go through the waiting room. We were busy looking to see if what we see is what we really saw. And we got fixated on what we saw. And we said, well, because I think I'm seeing what I see, I'm going to skip the waiting room. So what happens? Admission fee. Time to come out of the waiting room. Time to come out of the waiting room. Now we get to actually go into the inner circle. We get to go into the inner personal space. And what's the admission fee? What do they pay? What's the cost to get into my personal space? What's the cost to get into my inner circle? This is really a question that will lend itself more to you individually in terms of what it takes for people to be able to be in your space. But it can't really be determined without using that waiting room. That's what I want you to really understand. Your admission fee is determined while you're in that waiting room. And better yet, I'll recast that statement. If I already know criteria, while I'm in that waiting room, while we are talking, I can determine if you have what it takes to be in my personal space. Now, I don't want you to think that you just heard me say something that's arrogant, that's puffed up, prideful. Oh, she thinks she's all that. She has to make an assessment. No, I say that to everyone, that we all should have that perspective about people we let in our space, because we want to be emotionally healthy. We want to be mentally healthy. And those two things are so critical that having a waiting room to deal with peeling back layers has nothing to do with being arrogant, has nothing to do with being haughty, prideful. She thinks she's all that. No. I just want to be emotionally healthy. I do. I want to be mentally healthy. So that's going to require some vigilance on my part. That's going to require some vigilance on your part. So when we talk about admission fee, like I said, that may have some variations from one person to the next. But if we were to talk some of the generalities of it, then what we're talking about is someone who supports you mentally and emotionally, someone who supports you in your journey, someone who is respectful, someone who is considerate, someone who has your best interest at heart, someone who genuinely cares about you, someone who's willing to be patient with you and take the journey with you. And as you're able to check off those boxes, the admission fee becomes quite clear that, yes, this is a person who will be safe and healthy for me. But I will never know that if I don't spend adequate time in the waiting room. I'll never know that if I take what I see at face value and run with it. I'll never know that if I open myself up to everybody and everything. I think this is so very important because we can avoid a lot of drama. We can avoid a lot of chaos. We can avoid a lot of hurt. We can avoid a lot of stress and duress if we just take our time. Take our time. Understand that emotional assassination is real. Understand that the foundation of it is the mischaracterization, that we're seeing people in a light that's false. We're seeing people the way that we want to see them. Sometimes we bury our head in the sand and we say, "Oh, that's not really who he is. That's not really who she is. Oh, no. That's not really who they are." We bury our head in the sand. But when we take our head out of the sand and we start having conversations that really give credence to allowing us to see and understand the truth of who someone is, once we do that, then we create a more healthy environment for ourselves. And I can't stress enough, this really is not about judging people. It's not about giving up on people. It's not about canceling people out. It's none of those things. But when we talk about self-care, when we talk about a place of healing, we have to understand just how important it is that for us to be emotionally and mentally healthy, it has everything to do with who we allow in our space. It's relevant. Who we allow in our space is relevant. And when we recognize that, then what we've talked about tonight, I think, becomes clear and it becomes critical. And it's something that we get excited about, that we have an awareness to say, going forward, this is really what I have to do for me. And that this is not a process that's just one dimensional. It's not just about, if I'm trying to be in a romantic relationship, this is what I need to do. This is about life across the board. If we really look at it, the formula or the process works across the board. Everybody should have an admission fee. Everybody should have a waiting room, because that's the way we can stay healthy. That's the way we can become healthy. That's the way that we can operate in our best emotional and mental spaces, when we learn a process that helps us to be, I want to say, not at risk, but it puts us in a position where we can avoid some of the chaos. We can avoid some of the hurt. And if we can find our way in that journey, if we can navigate our way in that journey, then I think we're going to be better for it. And we have to be okay with the fact that everybody that shows up can't stay. I don't know. Sometimes that doesn't sound nice. Sometimes that seems tough, but it's a reality. Everybody that shows up can't stay because they're not going to be healthy for you. And I want you to be healthy. I want you to be emotionally healthy. I want you to be mentally healthy. I want you to have the tools and the knowledge that you need to avoid some of the pitfalls. And that's really what this was about tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that you will continue to journey with me as we continue to do these videos. And I always want you to be courageous enough to be present in the truth. So until the next time, I bid you a good night and thank you again.